Welcome back to another Introduction to Insect Taxonomy. This will be part 9, and today we're going to be doing an overview of the true insects. So this is kind of a quick summary of class Insecta. If you look here, this is what we were working on last time. This was the hexapoda. So we talked about Entomology last time. Let me get my pen working here. So we were talking about Entomology last time. Specifically, this last video was about the collembolans. And before that, we did an overview of the Entomology, which are insect-like creatures. Some of them used to be considered insects, but modern cladistics doesn't have them as part of the insects. So today, we're going to be talking about actual insects. So we have the apterous insects, so these are the insects with no wings, the zygentoma and the archaeonatha, and then the true what we think of as the true insects, which are the insects with wings. So the pterygoda are the winged insects. The archaeonatha and the zygentoma have no wings. So that's the difference between those two. We will be getting into a bigger cladistics diagram here in a second. But as a reminder, when you see ptero or tear, which you will see quite a bit when we're talking about the insects, this specifically means wing. So the word whatever the word is in that case is making reference to something about that insect's wings. So if we look at a cladogram of the insects and the entonates, obviously, this is very small. You can't quite read it, so we'll be zooming in. But you can see that there are many orders of insects. So everything listed here is an order in class Insecta. So there are many orders. So these are broad categories of insects that all have similar morphologies or similar body forms. And many of them will share similar habitats and lifestyles. So when we zoom in here, when you're reading this, you'll read it from top to bottom as up here is the most primitive. So this is the most primitive. And down here are the kind of the newer evolutions. All of these are extremely old groups, but they're the newer evolutions. Whereas some of these more primitive ones have been around for a very long time. So if we zoom in here, you'll see things that you have already you've already heard me talk about. Starting up here, these are the entonaths. So these are Entonatha. So we talked about these last time. You have the Protura, the Collembola, and the Diplura. And we talked a lot about the collembolans. But these aren't the real insects. So the real insects start here at this branch. Maybe I'll do this in, you see as a blue, maybe, or blue-green. So what I made reference to last time, or not last time, but just on the last slide, kind of at this line here, these are two separate groups, the archaeonaths and the zygentoma. These are the silverfish and the firebrats. And you may have these living in your home. These used to be called the Thysanura. This here means Thysanura sensulato, or lato. So sensulato, this is used a lot in taxonomy. It's Latin for in a broad sense. So these two groups, these two orders used to be in the same order called the Thysanura. They have since been divided because it turns out that they're not super closely related. But the archaeonatha and the zygentoma are apterous insects. Apterous is a tear, so without wings. And these are frequently, you'll find them in like your bathroom, if you all have a storage closet full of cardboard boxes or paper, in your fireplaces. They tend to feed on detritus, specifically cellulose and starch. So anywhere where you have a lot of wood or paper or cardboard and things like that, you'll frequently find these crawling around. They're very, very small. They have lots and lots of cerci, these like tail filaments. They have 3 long tail filaments. Um, uh, they do have antennae and no wings, so you can see why we thought that they were related, but it turns out they are closely related in that they're like cousin orders, but they're not that closely related. The next group that you see here are the Paleoptera. So there's actually another dividing line here in the evolution. So you have non-insect, insectoid-like things, and then you have the evolution of insects branching off that, but those insects that evolved had no wings. These are the apterous insects. Now you have the Paleoptera, or the old wings, the ancient wings. And these are the kind of first insects that actually evolved flight. So these are the mayflies and the dragonflies. So mayflies and dragonflies, and then the dragonflies also have damselflies in this group. Damselfly. So these are the Paleoptera. And what makes them the old wings? Just by looking at their wings, they are extremely high venation. And obviously, we're not going to talk about all of this stuff in this particular video. I will be doing a video on each of these orders, at least one video. Some of these orders will have multiple videos, but they have lots and lots of veins in their wings. And what's more interesting is that they can't fold their wings over their bodies. So they hold their wings straight out, out the back of them. Let me I don't want to do that. That gets rid of everything. So what's interesting about them is that if you have, a head and a thorax and an abdomen, their wings go straight back. They can't fold their wings scissor-like over the back of their body, so they hold their wings more like a butterfly instead of holding it over their body like a bee. So like a bee will fold their wings back over the body. They will layer on top of each other like this instead of sticking straight out the back. So they are the old or the ancient wings. And then after them, you have the Neoptera, the new wings. So everything under the Odonata and the Ephemeroptera. So Ephemeroptera are the mayflies, Odonata are the dragonflies and damselflies. Everything that comes after them are referred to as the Neoptera. These are the new wings. These are all insects that figured out how to fold their wings. Sometimes it's not just folding them over the back. Sometimes it's folding them up like a paper fan, or folding them in other ways. And frequently they've lost their wings, things like that. So these are the new wings. And out of the new wings, the things with the new wings, they are divided into 2 groups further. So there's 3 groups, but I'm going to be talking about 2 of them. There's the Polyneoptera and the Paraneoptera, which we'll talk about first. And that division line is right here. And this is divided into the hemimetabolous insects. Let me put this farther over. Because this is important. Hemimetabolous on top and the holometabolous on the bottom. And what that means is the hemimetabolous only go through a partial metamorphosis. And this is true for the apterous, apterous insects don't go through any metamorphosis. But the Ephemeroptera and the Odonata go through a partial metamorphosis. And the holometabolous insects go through a true metamorphosis. I can't spell today. So what does that mean? So the true metamorphosis is what you think of when you think of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. It starts as an egg, and it goes into a larva, that goes into a pupa, that goes into a butterfly. So this is a true metamorphosis where the immature state does not look anything like the adult state, and it goes through a pupal stage or a chrysalis stage. In a partial metamorphosis, basically what happens is that the immature, it goes egg, small immature, larger immature, adult. And basically the insect just gets bigger, and it grows wings as it gets bigger. Um, the same is true for the Ephemeroptera and the Odonata. They spend most of their life in the water. Their adults fly, but the immatures are in the water, and they slowly grow. They develop something called wing pads, and this is true for all of the heavy metabolist insects. They develop something called wing pads, and so they don't have to go through a metamorphosis stage. Basically, the immature is just a smaller version of the adult. They live in the same locations as the adult for the most part. They feed on the same things as the adult. They just slowly grow wings. The holometabolous insects, the immature looks nothing like the adult, and they go through a metamorphosis in order to develop their adult body plan and the adult wings. So that is the big difference between these two groups. Within the hemimetabolous insects, you see two groups here, the Paraneoptera and the Polyneoptera. These are basically the orthopteroid insects, things that kind of have the body plan of a grasshopper, and more like the Hemiptera-like insects, which is things that have the body plan of something like a stink bug. And that's what this big division is between like the Zoraptor and the Hemiptera is one group, and then the Plecoptera to the Zoraptor, sorry. The Socoptera through the Hemiptera, and then the Zoraptera through the Plecoptera. So before I realize that that's a lot of information, but we will go through all of this. But that's the two big out of the Neopterous insects, the new winged insects. That's the two big divisions: the hemimetabolous and the holometabolous. So you have things like this. The Plecoptera are the stoneflies. These are insects that primarily spend their immature stages in the water. And then the adults will fly out. They usually are found around streams and rivers. These are freshwater species. There are no, as far as I know, there are no insects that can actually survive in saltwater. There's a few insects that can kind of survive on top of it, like they glide along the top of the saltwater, but they don't undergo a life cycle in saltwater. So all insects in water are freshwater species. The Isoptera are the termites. And they are very closely related to the roaches. They are now actually considered one group, I believe. They're called the Isoblatodia. So the termites and roaches. You probably don't need me to tell you what termites and roaches are because they're huge pests. But termites are generally subterranean or live inside dead wood. They eat wood. And the roaches live in everything and are disgusting. The Mantodia, the Grilloblatodia, and the Mantophasmatodia, the Phasmatodia, and the Embryodina. So this is a big group. So these are the walking sticks, which are the Phasmatodia, the mantis-like walking stick, which is the Mantophasmatodia, the Mantodia are the praying mantis, and the Grilloblatodia are sometimes called ice crawlers or rock crawlers. They kind of look like a mixture between a walking stick and a cricket. Grillo, when you see Grillo, it usually is referring to cricket, and blatted usually refers to cockroach, so you can kind of imagine what they look like from that. But these are all closely related in that they have very, very similar body plans. They all kind of have a very elongate body, modified legs. Think of like a praying mantis or a walking stick. They are very similar. The Embryodina is something that, unless you live in the tropics, you may have never seen. These are called web spinners. There are very few that live in temperate areas. They're generally associated with tropics. They tend to be quite a bit smaller than a walking stick, but they look like a walking stick. But they have silk glands on their forelegs, and they can spin their own webs. It's not a huge group. I have seen them a few times when I was living in the Caribbean, but in North America, in like the United States or Canada, you're not really going to see them very often. The Orthoptera are the crickets, the grasshoppers, the katydids, things like that. Dermaptera are called earwigs, which are, you've probably seen these in your garden. They're the insects with big pincers on their butt. They generally live in soil, and you'll find them in your garden. I believe they're omnivorous, so they'll kind of eat whatever. Zoroptera are usually referred to as angel insects. I have never seen one alive. I've seen them in person in collections, but they're very small. They look very similar to termites. They live generally in decomposing wood, but they're not really pests. They just kind of feed on wood shavings and things like that. If you're going to be looking for them, you'd probably want to be in like a sawmill or something like that. I mean, they are in North America, but I don't think that there are very many species in North America. The next group are kind of the stink bug-like body plan or the louse-like body plan. So the Socotra and the Theraptor are the lice. Socotra are the wood lice, and the Theraptor are the animal lice. So Socotra you tend to find them on plants. They're plant lice, so any sort of fungal infested plant you'll probably find Socotra on. They don't always have wings. They generally are defined by their very distinctive head shapes. And the Theraptera are body lice, head lice, crab lice, things like that, bird lice, and you will generally find them on people and animals. The Thyssenoptera are a microscopic insect group that you will usually find in fruit and flowers. These are called thrips. Let me change this out. Let me make some room here. So the Thyssenoptera are generally called thrips. And they are very small. They are very important agriculturally because they are pests. They are a pest species. Pests. They are called thrips with an S. Singular or plural, the S is always there. They are pests and they generally vector disease. So they spread viruses and bacteria and things like that between plants. They are very important agriculturally. And then below them are the Hemiptera. These are the true bugs. These also included in this are things like things that you don't really associate with the Hemiptera. So this is cicadas and things like aphids, things like that. So these are insects with piercing, sucking mouthparts. This includes stink bugs and assassin bugs and cicadas and aphids and scales and all of the terrible agricultural pests that you can think of. I shouldn't say most of them. Many of them are hemipterans. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about the groups within the hemipterans. And then finally, we're going to get into the holometabolous insects. These are the orders of insects that go through a true metamorphosis. So you have Neuroptera, which are the lacewings. You will see them out a lot at night. If you see little green insects flying around at night, around like lights that you have outside, they're probably Neuroptera, and they are hunting. I do believe they're all carnivorous. Is that right? Yeah, I believe they're all carnivorous. The Megaloptera are the Dobson flies. These are an aquatic species. You've probably seen, if you haven't seen them in person, you've seen pictures of them. They're an enormous, enormous insect that are usually associated with streams. The Raphidioptera, so these are the Dobson flies, or the alder flies. The Raphidioptera are snake flies. I've never seen one of these alive. I can't tell you a ton about them. It's a small group, but they have a very, very elongate body, hence the name snakefly. Coleoptera are the beetles. Everyone knows what a beetle is. So these are all the beetles. This was once considered the most diverse group, but now that title belongs to the Hymenoptera. But there are millions and millions of species of beetles. The Strepsiptera I've talked a little bit about on my other videos. These are the twisted wings. It is an order comprised entirely of parasitic insects that primarily feed on other insects. You have probably never seen one in person because you would generally have to look inside another insect to find one. The Diptera are the flies. House flies, mosquitoes, fruit flies, all that, gnats, horse flies, all that. Those are the Diptera, and it literally means two wings. Because flies only have two wings. Most other insects have four. The Mecoptera are the scorpion flies. They are not flying scorpions. They are just called the scorpion flies because they have this weird little tail appendage on them. That tail appendage is only on the males because it's their reproductive organs. Siphonoptera are the fleas. So if you have pets, you are familiar with these. These are the blood-sucking fleas. They can also get onto people, and they spread lots of diseases. So make sure that if you do have a pet that you are treating them for fleas. The Trichoptera are the caddisflies. And it literally means hairy wings. If you were to see one, if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would think that you were looking at a brown moth. They look very, very similar to moths, but they are aquatic. So they spend most of their lives around fresh water. Their larvae live in fresh water, and that's where they pupate. They probably pupate in the mud, actually. The Lepidoptera are the butterflies and moths. So these are the scaled wings. And finally, the Hymenoptera, which is the most diverse group because of parasitic versions of this. These are the wasps, the bees, and the ants, defined by their wasted wings. They have wasted bodies and wasted wings. They tend to be social insects, as you are familiar with if you've ever dealt with a nest of bees or a nest of wasps or a nest of ants. Although there are many, many solitary insects within the Hymenoptera. So, as you can see, now that we're actually getting into the insects, there is a lot to talk about with all the different kinds of insects. And I've said this many, many times, but remember, there's an estimated 1.5 million identified insects and an estimated 10 million plus unidentified insects. So we're talking about an enormous group of animals. This is the largest group of animals on Earth, and they've been around for a very, very long time, so there's a lot to talk about in all of these groups. My plan is to talk about, at least do one video for every group, which will suffice for some of the smaller groups, but when we get to these larger groups, like the Hemiptera and the Lepidoptera and the Coleoptera, the beetles and the bees and the butterflies and stuff, I'm gonna have to split into multiple videos because there's just so much to talk about. So that's the plan. The next video that we do will be on the Archaeognatha and the Zygontoma, the Thysanura sensulatu. So these are the Apterous insects that they have no wings and they're ametabolic, so they don't go through metamorphosis at all. So that will be the next thing that we talk about. And until then, I'll see you later. Bye.